you're just not forming an identity based on things you believe and things you create and things you do. You're basing an identity based on what you avoid. I thought I knew who I was until life showed me I didn't. The moment things got hard, I realized I had no idea what I stood for. Or at least that the vision I had of me was completely different to what I was actually doing. And that bugged me a lot. Because as someone who's studying psychology, and I'm all about knowing everything about the brain, I want to get into neuroscience at this point, it's just incoherent to realize that you as a person is completely different to the identity you've built of yourself inside your head. So today, guys, I want to show you and explain to you how we can better our own identity and how we can actually dissect it. This is actually from a class of mine, and I've just interiorized all the topics, and I've synthesized the information to show it to you. So if you want to know more about identity formation, how we can face challenges without, hurting our own identity. I'm Paula, your psychologist who's not a therapist, and I'm so excited to finally get to talk to you again. So without further ado, let's go. Let's get into it. Throughout our teenage years, especially like childhood, teenage, and young adulthood, we're forming our identity more than ever, okay? And we go through crises as like moments of like, what the hell is going on? Like moments of realization that, hey, maybe we need to change something, or something has happened in our lives. Like, I don't know, your parents got divorced, or you broke up with someone, or yada yada yada, or you just changed schools. Like things like this happen all the time. So the theory is after this crisis, you overcome them and you kind of like shape your identity a bit more. And the goal is to achieve your identity. And in this case, a crisis leads to commitment. It is achieved through reflection and emotional investment and involvement in your life's problems, situations, making conscious choices, and committing to the things you say you will do. This predicts greater maturity and social performance. It is also associated with the parenting styles you got when you were a child and the amount of encouragement of your own autonomy you got when you were a kid, and also the kinds of relationships you got, yada yada yada, especially with reference to your parental figures, teachers, or figures of authority in general, okay? And also, it is clearly linked to the kind of relationships you had, and if those were based in reciprocity, closeness. We could also link this type of identity form to what other people call like attachment styles. At first, it makes no sense the way you like attach to people and to things comparing to your own identity and how you face challenges, but it has some similarities in the sense that if you grew up in a safe environment, you're likely not gonna have a bad type of identity achievement, and you will achieve your identity with, of course, friction, but with the tools to endure those. The problem is when you don't. Actually, the problem is not directly linked to when you were a child, your parents mistreated you. That's not that simple, okay? What tends to happen in actuality is that with some aspects of our life, we are, it's kind of easy for us to form an identity on that topic. For example, if you've always had a pretty good, solid relationship with your parents and your family and you're close to each other, when forming relationships, you're likely, and not even romantic, but like friendship and people around you, you're likely to have great social skills. But for instance, if you were not good in school, aspects of your life more that go more with achievement, like intellectual achievement, you may need more help there. Or it may be a bit harder for you to form an identity on that area. And I'm saying this because that doesn't mean that a person has identity and another doesn't because their parents mistreated them or they had a hard time at school or anything. This is not that simple. It's just like we all lack some things and we all succeed in others more easily. It's just finding yourself and finding where you are. It's just finding where you lay in the spectrum in the different aspects of life, because there are plenty of aspects. I don't know about your life, it's completely different to mine, probably. I don't know. So we could compare good identity achievement as a secure attachment, as the good way or easiest, more secure way of moving and forming your identity. Because what we want, what we're looking at, is commitment with yourself. That's how we form identity. And first we have foreclosure, which is commitment is reached without a presiding crisis, by accepting the opinions given by other people, aka being indoctrinated. It doesn't function by the individual reflecting and exploring the world, but rather by just accepting the things they've been told since a very young age. This can lead to dogmatism easily and obedience toward authority figures. While it may be associated with people who are happier and self-assured, these feelings are actually quite fragile, and they are really easy to shatter when their beliefs are questioned. Again, I don't care about your religion, but let's just say you believe in a certain type of God and someone else asks you a question about it, and you start like questioning, like, oh, I don't have enough arguments that I've built by myself. Like, I haven't had a crisis where I was like, wait, why do I think that this is the reality? If you never sit and think, you don't truly have opinions, you don't truly have an identity. Your identity is a copy paste of other people's, and that's not yours. That's copy paste again. This is technically seen more, again, not always, but this is seen more in households and situations where the child lives under like really authoritarian parents, and they don't feel like the children don't feel free enough to just speak up. That's when they tend to believe more in what they are told, especially if the child is also not only by fear but like through positive reinforcement being told that they have to believe this and only this. But specifically, if you've like children who feel a lot of fear when like growing up, they tend to go more towards foreclosure and like finding commitment not through identity formation but through copy-paste type of identity. Then we have something called moratorium, which is really weird. Like, yeah, I still don't know what that means. I should probably Google it. But anyway, which involves a period of crises without resulting in commitment. It often manifests as a resistance to authority and lack of commitment in intimate relationships. Avoiding stuff. This is literally avoiding everything. Even through the adolescent values and emotional closeness. Like, even when it comes to emotions, you're also avoidant. People who tend to avoid everything and any type of commitment they could have because they are afraid, again, but they are afraid. And by avoiding stuff, you're forming your identity. Therefore, you're just not forming an identity based on things you believe and things you create and things you do. You're basing an identity based on what you avoid, on what you're not, and on what you lack, which is extremely negative. And I'm gonna be honest, I relate a bit to that. Not gonna lie. And these type of people need to spend a lot more time to resolve the crises and achieve a constituted identity because they've been like avoiding. And that doesn't mean that, for instance, me, I relate to this to some extent, but I don't relate to it in every single aspect of my life. I just relate to it in some aspects. And then we have identity diffusion, which is like the worst type of identity formation you could have. I'm sorry. Like, this is likely not, this one is actually kind of like strange. Most people don't have this type of identity formation, but this is characterized by avoidance of commitments and lack of reflection on possible options. So this actually differs from moratorium, because moratorium, they're just avoiding, but they are aware of the situation, okay? They know they could do kind of like, they could sit and form an identity, but they just like act out of fear. The type of identity diffusion, they don't tend to even think about the situation. They like the fear and the angst goes to an extreme in a way that they don't even think. Or maybe they are not even anxious, they just don't think, like, we don't necessarily know why people do what they do. We don't know the cognitive and affective or emotional reasoning behind the people. We can just know their actions. And the people who tend to avoid a lot of commitments and lack a lot of reflection about the possibilities they have about their lives, when they face a crisis, there is a huge avoidance of thinking about the future, okay? So not avoiding because you're overthinking the situation, you're avoiding because you're avoiding thinking about the future. It is associated with higher feelings of loneliness, sadness, alienation, and it is also related to permissive or rejecting parenting styles, along with a lack of parental availability. Because of course, like, if your parents never taught you how to think and how to be a respectful and empathetic person, of course, chances are it is going to be harder for you to become empathetic and respecting towards other people. Honestly, reading about it, like in class, it made me realize something kind of uncomfortable about myself, and I will just say it. I feel a bit uncomfortable, but I will say it. For a long time, I think I was avoiding friction in my life. Like, things were fine. Things were okay. There was no huge problem, but something inside of me was just like, like my stomach was all in knots, and I was like, why the hell is like something wrong with me when I should be extremely satisfied with my life because it's hell amazing, and most people in the world don't even get to experience the life I experience on the daily basis. And after a bit of reflection and talking to people I love a lot, I realized that I was maybe too comfortable with my life, and I was avoiding little things that could actually like benefit my life a lot. And that comfortability of avoiding stuff sort of like tricked me into thinking I was kind of like living a great life, when instead the satisfaction doesn't come from like avoiding stuff. And if they are like the smallest thing in the world and you're not like quote unquote hurting anyone, you're hurting yourself. The truth is, I didn't really know what hard work looked like. The only place where I can say yes, it's the place where I like push myself to the limit, is the gym. And literally today I was doing some lunges and I was like, dude, no, I'm like not even pushing myself half of the way as I could. I'm just faking it. I'm faking my suffering, which is kind of weird. But I just realized that my threshold of pushing myself is just so low. It is kind of like annoying, because in the back of my mind, I know I can do much more. I just don't do it, and I say, well, it's a lot, and I'm like, no, you don't. If I know that I can bake a cake, why is it that I just, mix the ingredients and expect it to be done without putting it in the oven and waiting? Like, the only situation in my life where I had to endure a lot of hardships, it has been emotional. And when I was really young. And so that made me even more avoidant. So I've just realized that I've been avoiding, like, suffering. But, like, not suffering as if, like, yeah, excessive suffering, stupid. But suffering of things that will make you endure the tasks and the things that you want to do in life, and hobbies that you're not going to be immediately good at stuff. And I know this is sounding so like self-help type of like motivational speech, but I've just realized I wasn't like practicing what I was preaching, and that realization hit me so hard because I felt so hypocritical, because I truly believed that I was someone, like my identity was like, okay, I am someone who's kind of like smart, at least not an idiot, someone who's talkative, someone who can argument stuff, someone who's kind of like hardworking and who can push herself when she wants to achieve something. Like, I'm very driven, and I want to do many things in this life. Why is it that there's this gut feeling inside of me that things are not going as they should? Oh, maybe it's because in the back of your mind, you know that you can do much more, but you are still not doing it. And that's not to, like, I don't want it to come as me insulting myself. I want it to come as me kind of like acknowledging that, hey, maybe now you know a layer more. Like if I were naughty and now I know a layer more of me, and I'm like, okay, so that okay, now you know. Now you need to change. And I think that's something a lot of us fall into, and especially when we grow up and we get into adulthood and we kind of realize more about ourselves, inevitably. And yeah, we tend, at least me and the people who I've talked to, avoid some kind of friction because we associate it with like kind of like failure or pain, when in fact that's when identity is actually formed, because identity is formed through crises. Again, we need to achieve our identity, and it is achieved through crises. And now I look and I say, hey, thank God that the other day I found that about myself, because now I can go through the crises and overcome it and actually become the person I thought I was. Oh my God. Literally, I promised my mom yesterday, like, Mom, the rest of the year, I'm gonna be uncomfortable. I know, I need to put myself in a bit of like uncomfortable situations, but not the type of like, I need to push myself to the max and I need to step out of my comfort zone in a self-helpy motivational speech type of way, but in a identity formation kind of way. Like, I am my own freaking experiment, and I want it to be in the most ethical way possible. Scientists conducting an experiment, they have a set of ethical guidelines so that people and individuals who are the subjects don't get hurt and yada yada yada, okay? And so I've realized that maybe I should look at myself a bit more like an experiment with a bunch of ethical guidelines in between. Like, I don't want to be Victor Frankenstein. Well, yeah, maybe I want to be Victor Frankenstein and create life out of something dead, but I'm not gonna do that. You likely have some crises that you need to endure, and that the formation of your identity should be through overcoming crises. In addition to the young mind that is going through like a bunch of crises, what happens if like a whole society is going through a crises? Because society is characterized by haste, conflict, instability, and I think like there's a bunch of societies like this going on right now. There's a study by Funes that's actually very recent, it's from 2018, that in such cases, adolescents seek identity security, aka they need to clarify what's right and what's wrong, and to find an ideological, political, or religious dogma, a certainty to adhere to dictonymous terms. This is acceptable, this is not, this is friendly, this is not, this is the enemy, and this is our family. And if you want to understand more about your identity and who you are, let's just say that identities are not singular, but they are multiple. That they can be defined in very different ways. It's just not, I am organized or I'm not. Is sometimes, if I'm feeling fine, I'm organized. And if I get the time, I'm even more organized. And I'm really organized with my room, but I'm not so organized with my closet. You know, it depends of many different things and many different factors. Also, identity is not static. It's depending on place and time. It continues to evolve throughout your whole life, which is beautiful, because there's always room for improvement, and this is a cute thing. Maintaining some authentic aspects while reshaping others in response to life's circumstances and your own capabilities of insight and reflection. What do I mean by authentic aspects? It's more temperament. That's the thing that like science says that it's not changing as much. Avoid defining your identity solely by the group of belonging. That's kind of like the number one thing you could do to be yourself without depending on others. Of course, you depend on others, but by having like an individual identity, you want yourself to be you. And if you want to define yourself by being generous and kind to other people, that's great, but that's something that comes from you, not something that comes from other people that they give you. Furthermore, today we must not reduce identity to only the physical and mental environment, because we live in the digital era and life is not going on in the streets. Life's going on the screen. I spend more time on my laptop than looking at trees. You know what I mean? Like, a bunch of our lives are digitalized. Therefore, we must also accept that part of our identity is in the digital space. From a developmental psychology perspective, we must also focus on digital identity. It is really important because the information published online that shapes how others perceive us, describe us, and determines our digital reputation. And not only ours, but how we perceive the world to be. There's this toxic relationship in social media because you post something and unconsciously you are like, your identity is subjected to the amount of likes, the amount of engagement you get, and you're like, oh, this is good, I'm good because people liked my post. Which, I mean, people say that, oh yes, I post things because I like it. Yes, you may do that, but let's just not undermine the power of likes. Our identity is also defined by what we see in social media, so it's kind of like a relationship of you give me this and I give you that, and it's also depending on many things, and it's kind of like toxic because most often than not the people we see and the things we see in social media are just a highlight reel. And I know everyone keeps saying the same, but it is true. So yeah, be mindful of the content you consume. Sounds like a great time for me to say, hey, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, because I see a lot of interesting things about psychology that could benefit your life. And also, I sometimes think about things that are weird as fuck, and I give a psychological perspective on that. So that would be great. And also, if you're liking and enjoying this video, I would really appreciate you to give it a like and comment if you feel like saying something about it, because I love having conversations with you guys. It's probably one of the most interesting and entertaining parts of doing videos. So yeah, let's keep moving, because we may fall into the temptation of just demonizing social media and being like, no, it's terrible, I don't need it, I want to throw my phone away, because I probably have this thought like 3 times a week. But you know what, that's not sustainable, that's not real. You know, we need to accept that part of our lives is digitalized, and part of our identity is also digitalized. Therefore, we need to have the right tools, and the right tools are being 100% aware and conscious of the situation. Okay, a bit like what happened to me, that I went through a crisis. We need to go through a digital crisis of identity so we can do what we want to do. Now I want to give you some psychological resources that may help. The answer to the problem of how do I overcome a crisis is by achieving a healthy emotional intelligence. And how do we do that? You know, it's difficult as fuck. Okay, well, emotional intelligence involves managing emotions so that they can become more productive, and extracting and using the information they provide, both about oneself and in relationship to others. This emotional management involves applying a series of regulation strategies, which can be classified as follows. First, cognitive strategies, thoughts we use to change or redirect unpleasant emotions and promote pleasant ones. So often these take form of self-instructions, you know, in your head, when you're like, okay, I'm feeling like shit, but hey, it's not that big of a deal, it's not gonna be forever. I know you're tired, but I'm still gonna get the hell out of my house, and I'm gonna go to class, or I'm gonna go to the gym, or I'm gonna go to the grocery store because I need food. Or I know I'm tired, I know I'm just like so lazy right now, but I need to cook some dinner because I'm responsible of myself. Those kinds of messages that you put inside your head to help you out, as if it were a parent talking to you. Those are the cognitive. Then we have behavioral strategies, so actions we take to change our emotional state. Let's just say, like, I start dancing and listening to music for 5 minutes to just make me a bit happier, cheer up the mood a bit. Of course, this has like a dark side, because if we use things like smoking or drinking or eating a lot when we're stressed, and our behavioral coping mechanism is one of these, that's not good, because that's kind of, soothing us in the short term, but hurting us a lot in the long term, because now we have two problems we need to solve: the OG angst and the compulsive behavior. Please be mindful, because I used to rely a lot on caffeine, like pure coffee, for my energy, and I wouldn't feel energized if I didn't take a coffee. And that was a placebo effect I was inflicting on myself. So be mindful of placebo effects. Like, look for placebo effects that you may think are, a causal relationship, like energy and coffee, when they don't. It's false causality. Then we have problem-focused coping, and those are strategies that target the cause of the emotion. For example, like reinterpreting the situation so you can have better feelings toward the situation. For instance, if you fail an exam, or you realize that something you've been doing for a long time is not what you want, if you feel like breaking up with someone because this someone is not for you, you can look at it as a good thing or a bad thing. You can say, okay, maybe this person wasn't for me. Now I'm not going to waste any more of my time, and now I've learned what I don't want. Or you try a hobby that you thought you were going to love, but you realize that roller skating is not for you. Okay, now I know what I don't want. And now I know that I can do something I don't want, but that I can also, plan and strategize to better my life and do things that I truly want. It's redirecting your own feelings on a fact. And then we have distraction strategies, which they can be good, but they can be really harmful. Strategies that shift attention from the situation that you don't like or is causing a lot of suffering into another that, is kind of like distracting. That's a bit similar. That can be intertwined with like behavioral strategies. For instance, if you play music and you start singing and dancing, that's a bit of distracting yourself, but also it's affecting your mood because you're behaving. So it's a bit intertwined. But yeah, it's just redirect your attention, like maybe watching a movie. If you're really tired and sad and you're feeling like your favorite movie is gonna comfort you, or have a sweet treat. That's a big thing on the internet. I don't understand it, but I don't know if I'm getting the lexic as well as it should be, but treat yourself every now and then, especially if you know how to use it to like cope with your emotions, and kind of like reward yourself and use it as positive reinforcement. And also when you're feeling down, to kind of like push you a bit to keep doing this stuff to like increase momentum. That's good. Treats can easily become a compulsive, rationalized behavior in your daily lives. Anyway, these strategies are most effective when combined, like all together, a bit of everything. Find what works best for you. I cannot tell you, because I don't know you. I cannot say what's best for you, and I don't know anything about your lives. So if you feel free, if you want to say something about your experience in life about it. But regulating your emotions, not something that, one day I wake up and now I know. It's not this. It's one day I wake up and I realize that I need to make a change. And so step by step, I do change so that I can have a better identity and I can move through life with less and better crises, so that I can solidify my identity. And on that note, guys, I hope I've said enough and you've understood what I said about identity. It's something that's kind of interesting. And I wasn't expecting to do a video about identity, but I think it's something that's really helpful, and it can actually benefit literally everyone. Because, it's knowledge that most people don't know. So if you want to know more about psychology, click here on this playlist. It's called Think Like a Shrink, so that you can go through life knowing a bit more about what's going on inside our heads, and you can see the world through psychological lenses, which is really helpful. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, feel free to subscribe, give it a like, comment, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a really nice week.